The World War was a crucial time for the world. Many countries were in debt and poverty from World War I. This gave rise to new governments. In Italy, a new leader, Benito Mussolini, ruled under a fascist form of government. Fascism is a type of government very close to totalitarianism, in which an absolute dictator rules with the belief of extreme nationalism and racism to all who oppose him. In order to enforce this government, Benito Mussolini had a secret police called the Black Shirts who would torture and kill any opposition.
Germany had a man by the name of Hitler rise to power. He believed in Nazism, which is very closely associated with fascism, which believed that the Aryan race was superior to all. His secret army was the Brown Shirts. Hitler decided to take over parts of Czechoslovakia. The world did not want another war, so in 1938 the Great Britain and France leaders met with Hitler at the Munich Conference. They agreed that Hitler could keep the land he had captured, along with gaining student land if he stopped conflict. The method of solving problems is called appeasement, or giving someone what they want to avoid war. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, breaking this agreement and starting World War II. In Japan, Emperor Hirohito was the leader. However, he had no power. The real leader was Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, who ruled Japan under militarism. Hideki Tojo admired people like Hitler and ran his country in a lot of the same ways. Militarism is a type of government that has a strong military and centers everything around this goal. Tojo hated foreigners and had a secret army called the Samari. After World War II, Hideki Tojo would be executed for being a war criminal. All of Europe was fighting. On one side was the Axis powers who were composed by Italy, Germany, and Japan. The Allies were Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. The United States had already started issuing neutrality acts in 1935 to help deter the war for the U.S. However, when the Allies asked for aid, President FDR issued the Neutrality Act of 1939, said that U.S. would not provide troops but would sell weapons to the Great Britain, France, and China. The Lend-Lease Act was passed that said that the U.S. could provide supplies to places that it was vital for the U.S.'s safety. One of the major tactics that Germany used during World War II was blitzkrieg. This means lightning war. Germany would first survey an enemy's area, then airplanes would drop explosives, followed by tanks and foot soldiers. This led to many civilian casualties. Many of Germany's generals were killed during this time, not because of war, because Hitler felt that they were disloyal. On June 6, 1944, U.S. and British troops came up on the shore of Germany and began their attack. There were heavy losses for the Americans and British, but because of all the technology and the mass manufacturing of the United States, the Allies were able to win. This became known as D-Day. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered and Hitler committed suicide.
On December 7, 1941, Japan dropped a bomb on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. This led to President FDR to make a speech saying,
"Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy."
This speech persuaded Congress to pass a declaration of war, putting the United States into World War II. The war was at a standstill, and the United States wanted to have the least amount of casualties for the United States as possible. So the government embarked on the Manhattan Project, a project to build an atomic bomb. An atomic bomb is a bomb that destructs everything around it by releasing nuclear fission. It can kill people instantly, but some may die later, or have kids who die or have birth defects. Unknown to everyone in the project, there was a Soviet spy, Perseus, working on the project with them and would later help the Soviets build their own. On April 12, 1945, President FDR died in office. and Vice President Harry Truman took his place. On August 6, 1945, the bomb Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. Japan still would not surrender, so on August 9th, the U.S. dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki, Japan. The bombs killed more than 225,000 people, or half the population of Wyoming. Japan surrendered August 14, 1945, or VJ Day. After World War II, the United States became a global superpower. They had developed weapons that people had only dreamed of, so this made them a superpower.
At the beginning of the war, the United States was under the policy of isolationism. The steps that led them into the war was even before the war. The passing of the Hoover-Stempson Doctrine was in 1932 angered at Japan. It was one of the reasons that Japan left the League of Nations. The doctrine said that the U.S. would not recognize any territorial expansion that was taken forcefully. The Panay incident was when the Japanese planes bombed a U.S. ship in the Pacific without trigger, increasing tensions between the two. 1940, the Selective Training and Service Act was the first time that America had ever had a peacetime draft. In 1941, FDR made his State of the Union address where he made his famous Full Freedom speech. In this speech, he said that everyone deserved full freedoms: speech, religion, freedom from fear, and the freedom of want. The Destroyers for Bases Agreement was signed in 1940, gave the Great Britain 50 obsolete destroyers in exchange for the land in the Caribbean that the U.S. would use for naval bases. The Atlantic Charter was between Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, and it discussed the war aims of both countries. The U.S.'s policy in the Pacific was called island hopping. The U.S. would attack Japanese-controlled islands in the Pacific and attack them. Then they would quickly construct their military bases on each one. This method of fighting was very costly, but it was successful. The U.S. got close to Japan, but fearing too much time and soldiers had been taken up, the U.S. dropped the atomic bombs.